Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome in to a July the 12th, Wednesday, Maize and Blue Reviews. Good afternoon, Michigan football. So we're ready to kick this one off, talk a little bit about Michigan. I'm going to tell you here at the outset, we're going to be getting into some recruiting and some portal news. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just 1 minute. But if you want to know accurate and you want the information on recruiting and the portal information and intelligence when it's coming out, well, you want to join up the Maize and Blue Review, and you want to do that today by going to michigan.rivals.com. We'll be waiting for you over there. It's happening. It's a lot of fun. You know, I'm going to ask you also, feel like a bunch of teases today, but I am going to have a question of the day regarding what you do when the sports are a little lean in the hot days. Well, I can tell you what is a great thing. If you're sitting around like, I don't have anything to watch, I don't have anything to do, July's boring, I miss sports. I understand that. I'm a big sports fan myself. Well, that's where the Maize and Blue Review comes in, where you're all day and all night over there talking about Michigan schedule. You're taking on Michigan from every angle that you can. And there's always somebody coming up with a different angle, and then you talk about it, and then there's another angle, and then whatever you want. That's the way it goes. I'll be asking you that question coming up. As always, you got a comment, you just want to say hi, like John, you can. You fire away questions or comments. We take them in real time. John, just type that up, and there it is. It's on the board. And we'll get to it. We appreciate your feedback. We look forward to it. You can ask anything. I've got nothing to hide. So go ahead. You got something that's on your mind, you type it in and we will get to it. What I have planned to get to is Michigan has a basketball portal visit arranged. And I'll tell you who the player is and when that is going to happen and how good of news that is for Juwan Howard and company. But we're going to start out with some recruiting news. June was so fast and furious. It seemed like every other minute something was happening in terms of Michigan football recruiting. And then, July happened and it kind of slowed down and things felt like it petered out a little bit. But, we got some news today about a couple of recruits, and I want to get to that as we kick things off today. I did look. I don't know if I look. I do. I look every day. I look to see where that team ranking is for Michigan for 24. And, at one point they were number one, and Ohio State getting Justin Scott, jumped Michigan to go to number two. Michigan has 25 commits, but they're sitting there as a top 3 team in the rivals.com team rankings, which, is not all that bad. And as I have speculated on, I think, top 5 would be wonderful. Top 10, considering how Michigan does when it comes down to the transfer portal. Heck, what are they up to 10 in the transfer portal for this upcoming year? And blending those two together, it'll feel like a top 5. So nothing to get upset about there. And in fact, it's everything to be excited about with not only the upcoming season, but how they're doing in recruiting and how they're handling name, image, and likeness and how they're dealing with the transfer portal. I know, sometimes you're, unless you are upset, don't have something to scream about, that it's like, hey, you always got to find something. Well, here's something for you. Aaron Scott Jr., you may say, he's gone. Why are you putting a guy that's going to Ohio State? Why are you even talking about him? He's announcing on, it says June 30th. It should say July 30th. He's announcing on July 30th his dad's birthday, and apparently his dad is a big Ohio State fan, and he is from the state of Ohio. So would his son really pick his dad's birthday and go to Michigan or Oregon? I mean, everybody believes that he is all set to commit to Ohio State. He's an outstanding corner. Everybody in the country would like him, but he's down to those 3 teams in Michigan, Ohio State, and Oregon. The news here is that yesterday it was a photo that was put out by a writer who he works for Rivals. His name's Kevin Noon. He covers Ohio State. He was at some 7-on-7 workout, and I put the picture up on the board, and it's, you would say, well, what the heck am I looking at there? It's a back of a guy standing on the sideline at a 7-on-7 drill. You're right. That is what it is. But if you look a little closer, and I'm not going to be able to blow it up there for you, I didn't do that. You'll just have to trust me. He's wearing Michigan shoes, Michigan Jumpman maize and blue shoes. Now, and say, well, that's going to be a reach. And now you think he's going to Michigan or something because he's wearing Michigan shoes? Not necessarily. We know that he was up, to Michigan and put on all the maize and blue and took the picture with his hand in front of his face and everything else like the kids like to do. And, it was, even when he was heading down to his Ohio State visit, he was putting a picture of himself in the maize and blue with a little heart underneath it until the Buckeyes told him to wipe that off, or he wasn't going to be able to take his visit down there. I'm guessing that's what they said, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's what they did. But the news here, I read Kevin Noon had a story, and he actually talked to Scott Jr., and the headline of the story was, is Scott still really undecided? And he told Noon that, yeah, he was. And Noon asked him a question like, hey, do you think you'll, wake up one of these mornings? And he said, hopefully, that's the way it happens. But so Scott is saying he still is undecided. But then, the shoes, like, you get a lot of gear when you go. You go to Oregon, they give you 1,000 things. And, then, they give you all this. And so you could easily make the case that, and Scott apparently, I didn't double check this, but I'm just going to take the word. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm going to take the word of the internet, who said his school colors are maize and blue. And so that's why, he could be wearing, the Michigan cleats and the Michigan gloves. But I thought this by Noon at least is interesting enough to share with you. I'll quote the story. Tuesday, Scott was seen wearing a lot of Michigan gear, including shoes, gloves, and a hat at the end of the event. All right. Now, I have put my hand on the stove a number of times, and I have been burned and have sat here looking into this camera and talking into this mic, telling people not to get their hopes up. And, if it's a guy from out of state is highly rated, and specifically if he's from Ohio, it's all a mirage, just sit back. And if it happens, it happens, but don't get your hopes up. And so that's something to at least remember. The thing about, and, maybe you could make the case that, he's got so much Michigan gear, and at the end of the month, he's not going to be able to wear it anymore because he's going to commit to Ohio State. So he might as well wear it now while he can before he commits, because, Ohio State fans aren't going to go for him after he commits wearing any Oregon. Obviously, he's not going to be able to wear any Michigan stuff. So he may be just, wearing that while the wearing's good. Easily that could happen. But, these guys also know what they're doing. Maybe it's just playing around too. Oh, that's an option. Or maybe, I could see the shoes. It's the shoes. Who cares what color your shoes are? Same thing with the gloves. Hey, and they're the school colors. The hat part is the one that's got me a little bit. It's got me. I'm not over here talking about Aaron Scott Jr. committing to Michigan on his dad's birthday, going against what everybody's saying, surprising, shocking the world, certainly Michigan fans. I'm not here to predict that, suggest it even. But the hat part, you're going to put a hat on? A Michigan hat at a 7-on-7 with, with people, not just the players out there. There's a number of coaches and fans in the media, put the air quotes around media, that are, watching his every move. Certainly they're going to be watching about what he's wearing. And to put a Michigan hat on, that's really something. Again, I get the shoes. I get the gloves. I get that those are his school colors. But to put a Michigan hat on, that's something. And you wear a hat, and inside, I sound like Pudge Rodriguez, who said this one time, the former Tigers catcher, the Hall of Famer. He said, "In the head is the brain." And you get the hat, and inside, I think somebody had linked him saying that he's torn between his heart and his head. As his head saying Michigan, in his heart because his dad, loved Ohio State. You could see it. I don't know if it's a good thing. Do you go with your heart or you go with your head? I think you're supposed to be going with your head. So I don't know. That's just where I'm at with it. I know it's a little, it's very superficial what I'm talking about here. This is not, the kind of texture that you may be looking for when it comes down to recruiting. You want the hard and fast news. But this is where it's at for today, at least when it comes down to Aaron Scott. Now, I'm going to take some feedback and see what the people, maybe a little bit more grounded than me when it comes down to evaluating what a high school kid's wearing at a 7-on-7. But I don't know. Sometimes the people are, crazier than I am. First one, Antoine. Rankings. These evaluators don't know what they're talking about. How players can go up and down and rank without playing is crazy. Yeah, Antoine, I don't have any problem. Like being in the media or somebody like I could be an evaluator if I went out and watched somebody and said, "Hey, I think this guy's got that. I think he's got him. This is the grade that I am going to be put on, that I would put on it." A kid, it's subjective. You and me could watch the same kid and we could be all off. And knowing that, like you saying, like, that's fine. I understand what you're saying. Take a shot at the evaluators. Take a shot at the process. Don't put anything into it at all. I'm okay with you doing that. I think you should take it with a grain of salt. No, taking shots at like saying these guys don't know what they're talking about. Some of them may. But just like we see, look at the NFL, how much more information and how much more money that they have. And they have 4 more years. And oh yeah, guys that are, 16, 13, 14, and 15 change a whole hell of a lot from the time they're 15 to 16. Think about yourself. And then, even 18 and 20. And look what a crapshoot it is in the NFL. So yeah, I mean, it's always it's a good thing to remember that it's subjective and it's a guide. And yeah, there's going to be certain people that don't believe anything that they're saying. And I'm all right with that. Antoine, you go ahead. Here's D's talking about Ohio kids. They're trolling. He talked about Ohio, answering all his questions too at his visit. Keep the wishful thinking. I'm no fool and I'm done with it. Okay, D's. I mean, I think that's more level-headed. And I think it is wishful thinking. And again, I am not. I saw the picture, and the picture really didn't say a whole lot to me. There wasn't 1,000 words there, but the hat just had me, I thought, worth mentioning. But I think this part, you're no fool. You're done with it. I think I would say Ohio. I don't know if he's trolling, but he is an Ohio kid. And I think it feels like, I'll say it feels like wishful thinking. And I don't want to be a fool, but I'm not done with it. I mean, I don't think it's 100%. I mean, is that where you're at, D's? Like, I think 90, I don't know, 80%. He's going to Ohio State. It's a pretty big number. And then I think, what was the story again? If I'm just recalling that, when he was growing up, he loved Oregon. His room, he had a lot of Oregon stuff. His bed sheet, maybe even were ducks because he liked Oregon. So maybe Oregon is still in with a chance, and then Michigan. So I don't know, 80% Ohio State, 10% Michigan, 10% Oregon. That's my read on the situation. But when you're 80%, when you only have a 10% shot and there's 3 teams in, I see why you would say things like, "I'm no fool and I'm done with it." I mean, you're really holding on to something that doesn't have a big chance at happening. If you're whatever you're doing, and the lottery is not a good example because you have way less than 10%, but I don't know, a poker hand. You have all of your chips and you're like, somebody shoves all of the chips. You don't even have to know how to play poker. But if they shove all of their chips in and you look down at your cards and you know that you have a 10% chance, are you like, oh yeah, I'm in? Are you probably going to take those cards and throw them into the pile there? Probably not a chance of you getting them. Here's AJ. Says, Dennis, you probably weren't wrong on who was coming to Michigan with people throwing money around. People go for the short money instead of going for the long-term goal and development and a true chance. Yeah, well, that's kind of how the world works, Antoine, for everybody. Most people are looking for the short-term payoff instead of looking long-term. I'm not sitting over here getting philosophical with you, but it's not like I live my life by this credo, but it does seem like, doesn't it, AJ, that things that normally are worth having or accomplishing, you have to take more of a longer view, and the quick fix, quick things. Those are more things that are like instantaneous payoffs. And in recruiting, I think that it feels like it can apply here. Of course, since Michigan is, in that situation where it's long term and they're not involved in any short term stuff. Of course, it makes you may feel a little bit better as a Michigan fan, and there's nothing wrong with feeling better as a Michigan fan. Michigan Mark chiming in says, since losing the game versus MSU, Michigan played its best 5 games of the season against the Big Ten's best. OSU, Iowa, Penn State, Illinois. I think the next step is to three-peat its Big Ten championship over OSU and the Natty. The Natty will come soon. Yeah, well, Mark, what they've done in the last 2 years, the team that they have coming back, the additions. Remember, it was the Magnificent Seven, and then they added a kicker and a kicker/punter, and then they added a corner from UMass, where they're up to 10 on the transfer portal. Transfer portal. The name, image, and likeness to bring the superstars back, like Blake Corum this year. The team that they have. This team is poised to be able to run it back and to get back to the college football playoff and potentially win it. It's true. I don't think that the play calling or Jim Harbaugh's philosophy is hurting them in any way when it comes to potentially winning the championship. I think they're in one of the best spots that they've ever been to win a national championship. You always go, well, what's going to hold them back? Well, there's a lot of things that can hold you back. I think the last 2 times, I'll just say it, and then you can correct me if I'm wrong. In '89, they were the number 1 team preseason, and they lost their first game. And then before that, it was '81. So the last 2 times that they were number 1, now they're not going to be number 1. But the last 2 times that they were number 1 in the country, they lost their first game of the year. You imagine that? All of this talk, then go out and lose the first game of the year. Woo! Now look, '89 they lost to Notre Dame, and then '81 they lost to Wisconsin. I know East Carolina is upset minded and everything. All of this talk, yeah, I like we've said it a lot. I don't mind repeating this. Michigan is in a wonderful spot. The football program has never been stronger or has never had a better chance to win a national championship as they do right now. Season's got to play out. Things change as you go along. After you watch the games, all of those things, injuries and turnovers, and other teams and all that. But they're looking good. You should feel pretty good about what's going on. D says, "Wake me up when Scott shows up at the barbecue." That's a good point. I will wake you up, D's. Corey says, "Watch him go to his favorite school as a kid, Oregon." Maybe. Let's look to what Wolverine fan 2 says. How did Jadyn Davis drop so much in the rankings when on the last day of the Elite 11 they actually played some semblance of football in the 7-on-7s? He was right there at the top with his score. Well, this is another thing, and I'll repeat it again. Jadyn Davis, Rivals is an outlier on him. They've got him at, at one point he was at 5, but he's still a 5-star, and I think he's ranked 20th overall. All of the other services and the composites, they're down on him compared to Rivals, way down on him. And what's the reason? Here are the reasons. His height, his arm motion, the way that he throws the football, his what could be perceived as a lack of top-end athleticism for being on the shorter side of being a quarterback. Now, those are 3 big things if you're just watching a guy in shorts. He's not that tall. Doesn't look like he's the, most incredible athlete out there. Hey, that funky sidearm motion that he's delivering on. Mark him down. Mark him down. I think I don't know, like how many of those guys, this goes to AJ's point a little bit earlier. Like, Michigan's watching off a lot of tape on him, watched all of his games and decided, hey, we're targeting this guy. This is the guy we want. This was not like Michigan's 4th or 5th choice. And this is Michigan's number 1 choice. This is their, they went all in on Dante Moore the year before. He ended up going to Oregon and then now UCLA. And this 23, they decided, Jadyn Davis was the guy that they liked. How does it happen? That's how it happens. He's not 6'3". He doesn't, run around like Lamar Jackson, and he doesn't, throw the most fundamentally, sound ball from people that have watched him. Now, that last part about him and his delivery, people saying it's a little bit long, a little bit sidearm. And I haven't known, like all of the video that I have seen, I have not seen the long throw or any kind of funky motion. It looks fine to me. Now, do I understand people like, hey, guy's 6 feet tall. And then you just say, but Bryce Young just won the Heisman Trophy. Guy was 5'10" and a quarter, weighed a buck off 5. He didn't look like he was any super athlete either. Well, there's a point to that. Well, let's see. Bryce Young had a great feel in the pocket. As soon as you got, 11 defenders scheming against you and trying to kill you, Bryce Young was as cool as a cucumber back there. He'd have 5 guys coming at him. He'd just move over a little bit to the right. He'd swerve around over here. He'd throw a little pirouette. Next thing you know, boom, he's throwing the ball down the field. Perfection. You don't know until you get all those players coming at you. But that's why, Wolverine fan, is that, and I'm not saying anything against the evaluators. The guys go out there. Some of them might be looking to make a name for themselves. Like, I'm going to drop this guy down. I mean, but if you're taking that approach, like I'm knocking a guy just because he's going to Michigan or because I want to make a name for myself, that's going to catch up to you. Most of the people that are involved, and I'm going to lump them all into one, most of those people are giving they're giving their honest assessment of what they believe. Now, they might not know very much about football or anything else. And then you do get bias is hard to get over at the quarterback position if you don't like the way somebody throws and you don't like their height and you don't think they're, the great athlete. Those are things that, generally you will mark things down, mark a guy down. That's what happened. That's the part that goes on. Here's XRPRB. I haven't seen him on the chat before. Good to see him. Antoine getting back in. It says, the part that actually simulates football is closer and that he did better. Yeah, I wouldn't get too down on Jadyn Davis. Here's the part where you could feel good about Jadyn Davis. Michigan really liked him. Michigan has been on him since the beginning, and Michigan really liked him. And it's not like unheard of that players that aren't like the most incredible, athletes, and I'm not even sure about that part either. That is just some of the knocks that I've heard about him, the delivery and the top end athleticism. I'm not sure about either of those things. Maybe these guys are right that are watching that. I am not sure. Be interesting to hear what the Michigan coaching staff would have to say about it. And then, there's nothing you can do about your height. But yeah, I watched highlights of him throwing the ball when he was at Providence Day as a junior. It looked pretty good. Looked like he could, had a nice feel in the pocket. Looked like he delivered a very catchable football to me. And I didn't see him, dancing around looking like Lamar Jackson. No, I did not see anything like that. Did I see him running over guys like Josh Allen at 6'5"? No, I didn't see any of that. So I don't know. But can you here's what you take if you're a Michigan fan and you're like, you don't want to hear any of the naysayers or any negativity or anything else. You say, well, when he finally did do a little something, he performed well. And the Michigan coaches like him. So that's it. That's where you're at. One of my favorites, Detroit WA Sports Talk, is weighing in. He's saying Georgia and Alabama listen to the rankings and they're winning championships. They're around these kids in camps 24/7. Rankings matter, but he'll probably go to Ohio. I think that's talking about Aaron Scott again. Corey weighing in on Scott. He says he thinks he goes to U of M. He wasn't too happy the Buckeyes took another corner a week ago. GAM. Somewhere I think the A stands for Andres. He says he thinks Scott's a duck. He thinks he's walking and quacking and sounds a little bit like a duck. Michigan Mark back in. At 15 and 16, you can jump out of your mom's SUV with a hot dog and beat just about everyone. At 20, it's like Rocky. 1,000 minutes quality training and prepping per minute in the ring / game. Yeah, you're right. At 15 and 16, this is raw, what you're looking at. And the hardest position to evaluate and then develop is the quarterback. So what we're talking about here, David Davis might be a great prospect, and it might not end up working out. I mean, we could all cite a million examples about different guys. Hey, this guy looked like he was the greatest thing ever, and then it didn't work out. Just look, you go back each year and look at the top 10 quarterbacks. Who's this guy? I didn't heard of, half of them. And then you're like, wow, how did this guy who was ranked outside the top 10, look like the best out of all of them? Here's Glenn, who I want to give a special shout out to, because Glenn watches this show through Facebook, and he always gives us a thumbs up or a go blue, and then it has earned him the diamond of top fan on Facebook by him giving us the shout out. So there is our number one Facebook fan, Glenn. Like to see it. DTWA Sports Talk says he's a diehard Michigan fan, but why not take the bag? That's not 1950. Michigan needs to focus on their style of play against teams outside the Midwest. They got their asses kicked outside the Midwest. Well, I think that's the thing about, I don't, kid, like you could say, well, they're focusing on the short term. And I could easily say, if my next door neighbor came in and said, look, Michigan's offering me a scholarship and Oregon's I'm going to use Oregon as an example. Oregon's offering me a scholarship. I went out to Oregon and someone handed me $50,000 and said, come on in. And they said, hey, next time you come back out for an official visit, we'll give you 150,000. What should I do? I would say, I don't know. Do you need the money? Like, Eugene ain't all that bad. Like, I'm not over here telling everybody, oh, don't you like these guys have earned by the evaluators again. If you got a 5-star, it's a certain amount of money that you get as a signing bonus up front. I never say anything about a kid taking 6 figures, 7 figures. What if a kid was offered? Are you really telling me, AJ, that if somebody, say UCLA, it was Dante Moore, what if, because Oregon, Michigan thought, I know this is what Michigan thought. I don't know if it's true or not, but Michigan thought that they had to go over multi-millions of dollars and jobs out there in Oregon. So what the hell was UCLA offering? $5 million? I mean, that's what it's like these, I'm making things up, but I feel like that's probably a pretty competitive number. What if Dante Moore said, look, Michigan says, if things go well on the field and I'm playing in a couple of years, I can make all kinds of money. But UCLA's offering me $5 million. Let's go to Michigan. So it gets to that part. You got to wait till you're in their shoes. Any of us telling them, no, I would do it this way. There's ethics, all that. Everybody can have their opinion on it. Here's my opinion. People should just go to Michigan. The best players should all go to Michigan. And they should get their education at Michigan, use the alumni and their connections, and then in a couple years, they can cash in as much as anyone with the networking and the alumni base and the education they're going to put in their back pocket and the winning on the field, second to none, the Maize and Blue. That's what they should do. Account 22 is talking about ESPN's FPI, saying that they have a 71% winning percentage chance against Michigan. And he's got a bunch of side-splitting emojis. Yeah, well, the FPI, I don't think it's anywhere. If they wanted to say that it was a 50% chance, I would say, hey, break the tie a little bit. You want to say 51%, on that. But that would be enough reason. Looking at it, if the season started and you saw some things from Ohio State and, you saw their quarterback and you want to up some percentages, fine. 71% is enough for me to say that the ESPN's FPI is stupid. It's stupid. 71% for Michigan sounds a little high, but 71% for Ohio State, whose quarterback hasn't thrown a pass yet? Come on. That's a bad data point. Don't use ESPN FPI or planning on, betting any money on the futures or anything else. Mark is coming back talking about Donovan McNabb told his hockey nephew, Nurse, if you're not in the library Friday night, you need to be in the weight room. Yeah, that's the way I rolled, Mark, when I was at school. If it was library, Monday through Thursday, and then it was the weight room Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Antoine coming back and saying ESPN's probably the biggest joke out there. They're calling people lazy. Yeah, I don't know. You get a formula and you feel good about it by, plugging the different dynamics in the computer. And sometimes you look at it and you're like, wait a second, like it looked like a good formula. But then you see it and you're like, wait, that doesn't make for a good formula. Sometimes that happens with these formulas. I remember for the longest time, war in baseball was argued. And it seems like people like war in baseball, especially for everyday players, not the pitchers. But there was always this player that would be like number one. Everybody's like, this guy's not like the number one player, and he would always be up there. I don't remember. He played for the Cubs. But it was always number one in WAR. And people were like, this guy's not one of the top 10 players. He's like an all right player. He's not like one of the top 10 players in all of baseball. And the formula is only as good as the numbers that you're putting in there. So FPI says what they use in there, so it's not a secret. And part of it, wait for it, is recruiting rankings. And so Ohio State, who does great in recruiting, and it does help you, and it does mean a lot. But if it's spitting out 71% against Michigan, then you can see somewhere they're going to have to twist the formula a little bit. I don't know what Jay's talking about. Do know what John's talking about. Let's see here. We've got more to get to. OT says Davis is no Bryce Underwood. Well, and on the flip side, Jadyn Davis, talked about his height and his athleticism overall, the way that he throws the football. Bryce Underwood, I've watched him throw the football, not in person, but I've watched him on film. Bryce Underwood looks like Andrew Luck, combined with Patrick Mahomes, kind of combination. Like he's got, I don't even know, I think he's 6'3". I mean, he is the prototype. And you watch him throw the ball. I mean, his legs already, I remember when he was 15, his legs, look like Earl Campbell. And he was already 6'3". He's got a great frame on him. And then, he's throwing the ball. He's no looking it. He's zipping it in there. You watch guys throw the ball and you see it come out. And you're like, man, that thing is exploding out of his hand. He's casually throwing it 50 yards down the field. And you look at the other end and the ball is right on the receiver. It's just drop. The receiver just goes like this. He's just running. And then they just put up their hands. Also on the ball just drops in there. You're like, this guy's one of the great prodigies ever. Bryce Underwood. But when what he's got? He's got the size, and boy, when he throws the football, it's just like, oh, this guy's got like he's got a generational arm. That's what he's got. Look at his athleticism. Pretty good too. So he's checking all of that. Like again, so like you sit down, height and size and athletic ability and the way that he throws, he's got all of those things. So yeah. Everybody and all of their whatever they're doing, their point, check. He's one of the greatest high school quarterback prospects the state of Michigan has ever seen. So yeah, no, he's not like as a prospect. They do not compare. So you're right about there. Antoine says you need to get one of these people who does evaluations on. I think most of them don't know a damn thing. Well, like I'm telling you, I kind of know how it works. These guys aren't just sitting around. I think the majority of them in a room watching some YouTube and coming up with the rankings. These guys put a lot more work into it. I'm not over here defending anybody. I know it sounds like it. I'm just giving you the other side of it. Like, it's not just like these guys are reaching into a bag and like, hey, here's a 5-star. Let's just, and let's, it looks like, George is interested in him. Let's bump him up. It's a little bit more. I think you're short selling the industry as a whole, but that's okay. I mean, you're a fan. You can do whatever you want. And I think a lot of people, it's like, it's easy. And it would be really easy for me to too, be like, these guys don't know what the hell they're talking about. These guys are just all generated by money. They're just looking at, the offers. They're just throwing things out. It would be easy for me to say, but I don't believe that. So I'm just going to tell you what I honestly believe with it. It's Count 22 talking about Michigan not getting smoked this year. Jorge Says Tom Brady went in the 6th round of the NFL draft. Not worried if Jadyn Davis falls in the rankings a little bit. Yeah, that's right. There's a good one. That's it. Michigan didn't get their asses kicked against TCU. Well, no. I mean, they didn't get their asses kicked. I mean, they lost by 6 points. So they didn't play a great game. I would agree with that. And, they were a heavy favorite. They shot themselves in the foot. JJ threw a couple pick sixes and they fumbled at the goal line and then they gave up when they were all in it, 76 yards. I mean, there was a bunch of stuff. They couldn't stop the run. They couldn't run the ball. I mean, there was a lot of things that went in there, but no, they didn't get their asses kicked. The Thinker, Ohio State will have the number 1 recruiting class in the country. Michigan will not be in the top 5. That's possible. Okay. I think this should say the Buckeye, not the Thinker, but I don't know. Ohio State fans have been joining in the fun recently. And I think this is another one. Michigan just does not have the talent to hang with Ohio State. You lost to TCU. I think Michigan people think their team is better than they really are. Well, most fan bases think that, but let's just deconstruct what you're talking about. Michigan does not have the talent to hang with Ohio State. The 2 most recent examples that we have, this was not a game that was, it was a bad bounce. And, this wasn't like back in, 96 when, Sean Springs slipped and Ty Streets took it the distance. It's like, wow, one play. And, John Cooper, kind of choked. Or the year before, Biaka Batuka, just, went nuts or anything like that, and it was still a relatively, close game. What we're talking about here is that your team got their bell rung 2 years in a row. And it was in the manner that they did it. What is happening is that the part where you're coming in and just thinking about talent, I'll take your talent. You guys look like a bunch of shrinking violets in the second half against Michigan, who manhandled you. You scored 3 points last year at home with the number 2 quarterback in the NFL draft and all those great wide receivers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You guys got the greatest wide receivers, and you didn't score a touchdown in the second half at home. So this part about Michigan just does not have the talent to hang with Ohio State is the stupidest thing that I've ever seen since I've hosted this show. Congratulations, The Thinker. This should say, I think it says the Stanker. The Stanker. What a stupid thing to write. Now, if you want to say that you think Ohio State's going to be in there with Michigan because they're upset, whatever you're going to say. But you just got your ass kicked. And look, you've got really nothing to say. So you should go back to your cave and sit in there and sit around in that circle jerk down in Ohio State and slap everybody around and talk about how great your recruiting class is. None of those guys are going to factor into the game this year. And your coach is a lot closer to John Cooper than he is to Urban Meyer, Stanker. But congratulations. You've said the stupidest thing that's ever been said on the Maize and Blue Review's Good Afternoon Michigan Football. You got that going for you. But if that's really what you think, it's a great insight into your fan base and the stinker. That's what you guys had out there at midfield where Michigan was planting their flag. A big stinker. And just think, Michigan actually, they retained their talent and they brought 10 guys in out of the transfer portal. Michigan is better than they were last year, and the game is in Ann Arbor. Now tell me again how they're, how they don't have the talent to hang with Ohio State. again. That's a little silly. Little silly stinker. Nathan says, if you make it to the NFL or not, the connections to alumni and education you obtain allow for great generational wealth after football. NFL is called not for long for a reason. That's right. Smart players that are thinking long term go to Michigan. Others grab the bag and are ethically challenged and, go to a place like Ohio State. That's what we're taking out of here. Here's the stinker. He's coming back for more. Indiana has won more bowl games in the last 20 years than Michigan. Stinker, we're talking about what's going on the field now. Not 20 years ago. Andres, you're winning when the rival fans bring up other teams than theirs to throw shade. Here's the stinker again. Aaron Nolan is a 5-star quarterback and ranked much higher than the Michigan QB. Sit around with those recruiting rankings all you want, stinker. I mean, what about your coach? What about your head coach? What about your defensive coordinator? What about all these superstar players that couldn't stop Michigan? That Michigan, when they balled up their fists, I'm asking you, stinker, and slams you right in the face. And you guys all just stood around and couldn't do anything. What happened there, stinker? I mean, come on. What are you doing here? Yeah, look at you. You have a lot of fun with that. My guess is Ohio State. You guys have had a great run, being able to get the quarterbacks and actually have them out on the field. But I'm going to give you something that could happen objectively. As we've talked about with recruiting rankings, subjective and everything else. Maybe Aaron Nolan will be the greatest thing. Maybe McCord, threw to Marvin Harrison when he was on. Maybe he'll be, the next great one. Maybe. But there's also a chance that he might not be. And Ohio State, at some point, they just keep throwing it out there. Wow, this guy's worked. This guy's worked. This guy's worked. One of those times, it's not going to work. It could be this year. All those 5 stars and everything else that you paid off, those guys are going to be out of there. And I tell you what, you better hope that you beat Michigan this year, because if you don't, I don't know how you're going to feel, stinker, because you sit around and, you just sit around loving those recruiting rankings and everything else, get you through, helps you sleep at night, get you on opposing fan bases shows and everything, get you a little silly. But your coach is going to look an awful lot like John Cooper, and I don't care how good those recruiting classes are. Cooper's recruiting classes were always great. I remember, I remember standing there around him, Kenyon Rambo won the hurdles in 10.5. He's sitting around talking about all these guys. Didn't matter. Those guys are all gone. Going the other way. Go back where you came from. Okay, let's get to some other recruiting news. Jacob Smith. His brother is Jared Smith. He is a commitment to Michigan on the defensive line. Jacob, his twin brother, is committing tomorrow. Now, where Jacob is going to go, I think Michigan. Why do I think that? Well, I think that he's going to follow his twin brother to Ann Arbor. Now, the flip side is that there have been many quotes with Smith saying, I'm my own guy. I'm not necessarily following my brother. I might want to pave my own path, that kind of thing. I paraphrase that, blaze my own trail, he may have said, but it's similar to that. You get the idea. So I'm not sitting over here telling you it's a 100% lock. Nebraska, Kentucky, others, interested in bringing him in, but I think that he's going to go to Michigan. I don't have a time tomorrow, but it's something to monitor. And the possibility, I think, is pretty good. Over 50% for Michigan. Probably closer to, I would say, if I had to put a percentage on it, 75%. That's how I feel about it. So we got nothing but Ohio State fans now coming in. Good to see you. I think somebody sent down some of that stuff on Twitter and, riled some of those Ohio State fans up. Let's get to basketball. For the Ohio State fans watching, that's not the ball it's the circular type a ball that they play with, not the other one. But Michigan is in pursuit of 2 more players. You may have heard of Jose Perez, the 6'5" guard forward. Michigan is interested in him. Last year he played, he was in Morgantown, but he did not play for West Virginia. He had been in Manhattan. He had been to Marquette. He had been to Gardner-Webb. So he's been around the block. And he's going to visit. Here's the news. He is going to visit Michigan at the end of the month. I think I've seen Gonzaga's name linked with Perez. And West Virginia still wants him. The situation with West Virginia is unsettled. If you followed that at all, Bob Huggins, who got a DUI after he had, gave some money back because he had said a bunch of insensitive things on the radio, really ridiculous things on the radio. I don't know what happened, whether I don't know, I was going to say it sounded a little mean, sobered up or something, but, it just looked at the situation a little bit differently with his resignation. I guess he didn't sign it. And now he's like, I want to go back. I don't think that's going to happen. Maybe it's about him trying to get all the money that he can. I'd put my money on that part with Bob Huggins, even though he said he resigned, but he didn't actually sign it. Probably just trying to get, more of a payout. Again, very likely there. I thought one of the biggest things with Huggins, though, and I don't really know exactly how this played out, but a former West Virginia coach had shown some interest in the vacancy there in Morgantown, and it was former Michigan coach John Beilein. And that Bob Huggins got in there and said, no. I want to hand pick who the next coach is. All of that sounds a little crazy. Like whatever Bob Huggins, and maybe, Bob Huggins, I don't know what his state of mind is, but he's accomplished and everything. But I would think that if John Beilein wanted to jump in there at West Virginia after Huggins was on his way out, that even Huggins could have been like, hey, that's landing on your feet. That's a nice spot to bring John Beilein in. Then, I say apparently, a rumor. Let's put it there. I didn't see the story. I saw people talking about it. So that's why I'm like kind of hemming and hawing about it. Could just be a bunch of people just, kicking things around and, making things up. And that's where I'm at, making things up about it. But the part that I'm not making up is that if John Beilein really wanted to come back there and Bob Huggins put a stop sign up on it and ruined it for the people in West Virginia, that would be terrible. That's it. All right. That's where we're at. Woo! Let's read some of the feedback. Account 22. Why are Buckeye fans even here? Big Game Garrison says, because it's a good show of a Big Ten team. Don't feel special. He watches all the shows. You watching that Rutgers pod, Garrison? Garrison, give me a rundown on, what was his name? Stanker? Forgot his name already. I'd have to go back. The Stanker. Give me your 2 cents on the Stanker. What do you think of him? Little out there, speaks for all Buckeyes. Handsome man, Tell me what you think. Guy's really dialed in with the Buckeyes. Really knows what he's talking about. Junior says Michigan is improving team size, speed, and girth to improve their championship chances. They have looked better each of the last 2 years, waiting on 23 improvements toward another title run. Yeah, like, look, Michigan was able to get back Trevor Keegan and Zach Zinner. And other years before NLI, both of those guys would be gone into the pros. Certainly one of them would have been. And so to get both of those guys back is a huge score. Now, losing Oluwatimi at center, who was excellent, who came in, and Michigan goes out there and gets the best center on the market, and Drake Nugent, huge score for them. And then Michigan's got a couple guys that have played tackle and have performed really well. Trente Jones, and you go down the list and what they've been able to do with some of the guys that they had, and Carson Barnhart also. And then they brought in a couple guys that are going to compete for tackle, and they had a couple guys that would have been all right. The offensive line is looks like it's in a tremendous shape. And then the superstar, Blake Corum, the superstar, Donovan Edwards. I mean, sitting around like Michigan, Ohio State does have a lot of great recruits and, fabulous players and all of this. Michigan's got as many right now. Michigan has, you can look at the recruiting rankings, and that can make you feel really good. You know where Michigan's got Ohio State covered? They've got them covered at the quarterback position. They also have them covered on each side of the line. They also have them covered in the coaching department. There's no really argument there. You can go back and take that to all your Buckeye fans, and you can say that's what they're saying up north, is they're better up front on both sides of the ball. The quarterback's better, and so's the coaching staff. I believe that. And you can, open up your computer and go and some people, when they open up their computer and, they shut the door, they're doing something a little bit different. You're kind of doing the same thing, but you're over there looking at the recruiting rankings. Oh, the recruiting rankings. Put on that second half of the Michigan game this year. You'll really like how that one went for you. I don't know with this one. I don't know. Can we get the Stanker to get in, or big Mr. Garrison, BBG? I don't know what he's talking about. Eddie says Harbaugh develops players much better than TDS. I'm finally learning some of this. The last guy that was in here kept putting, I didn't know he was like, I thought he kept talking about Tennessee. He was talking about the team up north. Let's just call them. Let's call them what they are. All this other stuff. BBG. Wins always mean something. No one has taken that away. There you go. So, as much as Mr. Garrison is an Ohio State fan and he's coming in, he does seem to be, willing to talk things through. Which I don't believe his counterpart who was on here is ready to do. The Stanker. Here he is. The Stanker is wrong. Thank you. So I figured that. I figured that we got a rogue, as much as, I'll bag on Ohio State fans and lump them all in as ne'er-do-wells and everything else. You could tell, there's some people that are, still can be above board and can talk some things. And then there's the guys like, the Stanker who come in, and then you kind of know what you're getting there. Let's do it. Ringo taking a shot. Ohio will always be below Michigan. It's geography. Can't really argue with that. BBG coming around. Likes Michigan's talent. Nathan's talking some Air Nolan. Air Nolan moved up second to drills that have no defensive linemen or relate to real football. Jadyn Davis was his 5-star was based on his junior football film. I'll still take Davis. Yeah, like, look, I'm not going to sit here and be like, well, because Aaron Nolan moved up to Aaron Nolan moved up and, Jadyn Davis moved down. No Michigan fan is going to say that they would take Aaron Nolan over Jadyn Davis. I mean, like, that seems like it would be preposterous to say if you're a Michigan fan. It's a fluid situation. We know these guys are young. We know that Jadyn Davis can be better than Nolan, and Nolan, showed well at the camps, and southpaw. It's got a, the ball really flying out, looked pretty good, over there. That means something. I don't know. Trying to argue and then try to say, look, hey, let's take it easy. I guess that's not what July's for. July. There's going to be my question for you. So I thought today was going to be a slow day. But maybe, file this away. When everything is going to be a slow day, just start talking about Ohio State. Trepa says, Day's a much better recruiter than Jim Harbaugh. Garrison says, Michigan is over 50% blue chips. It's not all 3 stars. Let me ask you this, Garrison. If, let's say Michigan did beat Ohio State this year, and you do fire Ryan Day, and you went to your wide receivers coach, would you feel like he had woke up on third base too? Or would you feel like, you might be in some trouble that way? Okay, I had one more thing for you, and let me just throw it out there and take some of your questions. And I know the answer. Talk about Ohio State. What do you do as a sports fan during the dog days of summer? I can remember way back when I first started in sports radio in 1994. These days right here were the ones that everybody got their vacation requests and filled out for. If you turn on the radio and your favorite sports talk radio show host is not on, he has looked at the calendar, looked ahead and said, I am out this week. Nobody talks about it. You might enjoy watching the home run derby. Nobody talks about it. The All-Star game last night, hey, some great catches in the first, and nobody talks about the All-Star game. Today, you've talked about everything that you could talk about, on Friday. Tomorrow, like there's very little to discuss. Everything has been talked about. There's nothing there. So you have to, try to create some things. And so I think we all know that, but that's what I ask you, what you do as a sports fan during the dog days of summer. And what I have found is that you just start talking about recruiting rankings and how much, some of these guys don't know what they're talking about when they're, when they're talking about, Jadyn Davis. This has kind of turned into an Ohio State show. I almost feel like I should be doing the, I don't even know how to do that. All right, let's go through some of the feedback here in the end. And we do have the question out there, what you do in the dog days of summer. BK. Ohio State has almost always recruited better than Michigan, but Michigan has almost always developed their talent better. Yeah. Well, right now I feel good about Michigan. And again, I feel like I'm getting sucked into something here, but Michigan, it's worked out at these last 2 years, and it's worked out at the quarterback position. The number one position, it has not been developed better, certainly under Jim Harbaugh. Well, I'm not going to say it was been developed under Brady Hoke or Rich Rodriguez. No, that was the biggest reason Ohio State for most of this 21st century was beating Michigan. You can go to Troy Smith, and and then you would even get like JT would go down. They'd bring in Haskins. He would go down. They'd bring in 12 gauge. They would go 3 deep, and these guys were their third string quarterback was playing better than Michigan. So all of that is true. I'm sorry. It feels like that these last 2 years, and Michigan has done really well, and Harbaugh has completely reversed this thing. And, he got Kate McNamara to get Michigan to the Big Ten championship game and to the college football playoff. And now he really does have a quarterback. J.J. McCarthy is the real deal. But previous to that, all of the Ohio State quarterbacks developed and Michigan's didn't. So this is not really true, BK, unfortunately. Now, the thing where you would say, hopefully, and this is going to take you a long way in where this series goes. If McCord comes out and he is like the greatest thing, he was rated like, he's same class as JJ McCarthy. He's supposed to be great. And if we're just going on the recruiting rankings, we know we can't do that, but they have been doing a great job with their QBs. You can't take that away from them. All the way through, they have been fabulous. Now, Stroud, the last 2 years, it's funny because he ended up being the number 2 pick. He'll probably have the most success in the NFL, but he couldn't beat Michigan. But it actually wasn't his fault. Obviously, it wasn't his fault 2 years ago. He played pretty well. It was the fault of the defense and their lack of toughness. If you have, I don't know, is that tangible enough for you? Because they couldn't stop the run. Try to get more specific on that. Because Ryan Day talked about after 21, he was preaching toughness. They got a new defensive coordinator in there and Jim Knowles, and they didn't look any better. They got manhandled worse in their own home. And like it or not, you probably don't if you're an Ohio State fan. I watched your spring game. Your defense looked the same as it did during the regular season, like an Ole defense. Kind of went up, and here's how you guys kind of tackled. You guys, if you had the whatever USC's colors were, I'd say that looks like the USC defense, the Ohio State defense. Not very good. Your guys' defense is not very good. Offense, you guys throw the ball all over the place. You look really good. But not on defense. And that's the crazy part, is that if you had a field goal kicker that could kick it straight, you guys would have won the national championship. And what would I be sitting here saying? I'd be sitting here saying, man, how did Michigan allow, how did they lose I would talk about more of the TCU game more. That's got to fire you up a little bit. Okay, BK has come back. Talking about the 24 recruiting class. The quarterback position is the weakest. There's no real difference between Nolan and Davis. I'm going to put my maize and blue cap on here. Davis is better than Aaron Nolan. Take it to the bank. OSU is worried about those toys at wide receiver and quarterback. You better worry about that offensive line. Antoine, bringing it strong late in the show. Mello says we are worried about the offensive line. Garrison says our offensive coordinator. I hate that narrative because anyone that takes over the job is on third base. That's true. I mean, if you have an outstanding program, but here's the weird thing, and this is what, for me when it comes to Ohio State, is that college football, you've got the great programs in both Michigan and Ohio State, the great traditional programs. But what's the number one thing in college football? It's the head coach. Like when Nick Saban was at LSU and then Nick Saban came to Alabama, people don't remember, if you're old enough, you remember, Alabama, they were suckers for a couple of years. Easy pickings, but not with Nick Saban there. And then here's the thing about Ohio State, which was shocking. Obviously Tressel, but then Urban Meyer. We knew what he did at Florida, but he went in there at Ohio State, even when they were on probation, and he was great on the field. Michigan fans want to talk about stuff. I was just talking about on the field. He was great. And so when they transitioned from Day, whether he was on third base or not, that was a huge situation to me. Like, is this guy going to be able to pick up the baton? Like, is he going to be able to be a great college football coach? And then for a couple years, they can look like he was. But now, I'm not. I mean, I was going to say I was trying to put myself in an Ohio State fan's shoes. That's hard to do. That's why I'm stuttering. And you have to be really honest. I'm sure Ohio State fans are wondering, like, boy, if the offensive line is a sieve and if the defense sucks and they lose to Michigan again, we might have ourselves John Cooper on our hands. And then where are you going to go? Is Hartline really? I mean, he's a great recruiter. Can he coach? I don't know if he can coach. I mean, he says he's the offensive coordinator. I thought Day, so that's a kind of a collaboration. Is that what it is? This is his first year, second year? I mean, I don't know. Is he going to try running the ball a little bit more? All right. I now know what this means. Mello, you give it to me for this. I'll give it to you. I troll the team up north fans and Georgia fans. I kept, a week or so ago, Mello was in here. He kept talking about ton. I kept saying, like, Tennessee. I kept thinking he was talking about Tennessee. All right. So what do you do when there's nothing going on in the dog days? Watch golf. That looks like a baseball and everything in between. Yeah, I'm with you. I'll be watching a little bit of tennis now that they've got to the quarterfinals and semifinals. Tennis is interesting now to me in Wimbledon. Golf, not this weekend, but next weekend is the British Open. That'll be exciting. And yeah, baseball. There you go. No wonder I like DTWA so much. We're kind of one and the same. We're going to look at it differently. Mello's hopeful that the Ohio State defense is going to be a lot better. What about that schedule, Mello? What about your schedule? It looks pretty tough. Phil Steele was on yesterday, and I know that Notre Dame playing on the road. I mean, that's a tough game. It should be a tough game. It looks like a tough game on paper. Well, let's see what this OSU schedule looks like. We'll just talk it through. Got to start out on the road in the Big Ten. All right, it's Indiana, and you're favored by close to 30 points. Yeah, of course you should win that, but that's not like taking on Youngstown State in the first game. I think you'd rather be taking on Youngstown State, number one, and then Indiana, but you can't do that. Then Notre Dame at the end of September. At Purdue, you got to play Penn State, obviously. At Wisconsin. And at Michigan. You guys, do we think that OSU is going to be ranked or undefeated heading into the final game? If you're a Michigan fan, would you rather see, like last year, both Michigan and Ohio State were in the college football playoff? Would you rather see Michigan, Ohio State, and whoever else, Georgia and Washington? Or would you rather see Michigan, Georgia, Alabama, and Washington? Is what I'm saying. Would you rather see Ohio State along with the Big Ten in, or would you rather see two teams from the SEC? I'm going to answer that. Or would you rather see one of those teams from the SEC, maybe Clemson, Washington, and then Michigan? I don't think anybody's going to want to see OSU, whether or not it's good for the Big Ten and, hey, here's some more money, we're all sharing it, whether it really would be nice for the conference. It's funny because when you get to basketball and you get to the NCAA tournament, you're always like, oh, hey, it's cool. 8 teams made it from the Big Ten. Let's all root for the Big Ten. But then nobody roots for Ohio State or Michigan State. And when it comes to football, like what would be good for Michigan would be actually have Ohio State beat Notre Dame. But I'm not going to ask the question about if Michigan fans are going to be rooting for Ohio State to beat Notre Dame because it's better for them because they actually play Ohio State. And it's better for the conference because people could say that and then they'll watch the game and they'll be rooting for Notre Dame. And you might hate Notre Dame. You do hate Notre Dame. Everybody hates Notre Dame. And yet you'll be rooting for Notre Dame. Weird how that works. We'll take some more. We're just rolling today, huh? Joel. Nobody knows for sure what kind of relation he has with his dad, nor is it anybody's business. But what if he's playing his dad for some reason and picking Michigan on his birthday? This is going back to Aaron Scott Sr. and Aaron Scott Jr. Aaron Scott Jr. wearing Michigan shoes, gloves, and a hat at the 7-on-7 this past Tuesday. No, that's right. We don't know his relationship with his dad. Maybe he's mad at his. I don't know. I'm not playing that game. If he wasn't picking on his birthday, I think the thing to, from a Michigan standpoint, is to think like Michigan's got a small chance because he is, he's I'll take a guy at his word saying that he's, he doesn't know. That's what he said in that quote. He hasn't made a decision yet. You want to say, yes, he has. Okay. I don't know. I'm just telling you the way I feel. I'm going to take him at his word that he hasn't made his decision yet. And then when it comes down to making the decision on his father's birthday, what if it was your son and you really loved Michigan and your kid liked Oregon or Ohio State? Would you say, and the kid went down to Ohio State and came back and said, oh, Dad, I love those coaches, man. I love the coaches. I feel at home there. Is your dad going to say, no, you know what to do? I mean, isn't the dad going to say you got to make the choice? But the part about picking on his birthday, that's going to be tough. His dad, who loves his kid more than anything, and apparently he loves Ohio State, and his kid, Junior, has decided to make his big decision, the biggest decision of his life up to this point, on his dad's birthday. And he's going to put the Michigan hat on. His dad's going to be like, go blue. Woo. It's a tough one. I would say, now that I've talked through it again, I put Michigan less than 10%. I'll put Michigan at 9%. But 9% isn't nothing. It's not like I'm going all in on 9%. But at least I got a shot. Hunden still wants me to go back to the last 30 years. How many times have the Wolverines delivered when expectations were high? Well, last 30 years? Not very often. Because in 97, they were ranked 14th. In 2006, they were ranked pretty high. They had a pretty good year. 2004, they were ranked pretty high. 2007, they didn't live up. They haven't. But does that matter? I don't know. Like your point is that when Michigan's been ranked high, they haven't delivered on expectations. It's a fair point to make. Jim Harbaugh wasn't the coach of any of those teams. So they haven't, so I get it. But that doesn't, I'm not automatically like, oh, Michigan's got expectations. Not going to happen this year. Look, I'm as scarred as anyone. When Ryan Day took over, he had to play his first game up in Ann Arbor. He had to have a new quarterback in Justin Fields. Michigan, meanwhile, was at home. They had a quarterback coming back in Shea Patterson, and then Patterson was all right in his junior year, and you'd expect, hey, maybe Patterson's going to be a lot better in his senior season, and then it felt like now or never. And then it didn't happen. That was coming off the 62 spot or something at the year before. So I don't know. I get that point, but I don't know. Back in my day, coaches didn't say about it. They'd say, well, we're not saying anything. We're keeping everything in-house. We're not talking about, beating anybody. We're going to be respectful to our opponents. Nowadays, you win a game, you run around, you wave at the opposing fan bases, you plant a flag, you tell everybody, to go kiss your butt. And then, and then you tell everybody, let's go, we're ready to rumble the next year. It's changed. So I don't know if that has anything to do with anything. It's a point. I just don't know how good of a point it is. It's a fair point. I just don't know how fair. Again, you want me to be wishy-washy. I don't think it has. It's not that true. BK. Michigan has beat OSU with Cade and JJ. Neither were a better quarterback than Stroud. The QB wasn't the issue. The issue was Don Brown's defense. Yeah, well, they were good quarterbacks, though. Like, I don't know, like they played. They did a good job. So you didn't have to actually have them better. I see what you're saying, though. I see what you're saying, BK. I take it back. I should. Michigan won the last 2 years. Now, JJ played great in the second half against OSU, but it's been the offensive line that has won it for Michigan the last 2 years. If I had to look at that one thing. So what you're saying, BK, it wasn't actually the quarterback, and then Mello saying 2 years ago was the defensive line. That's a pretty good offensive line and defensive line. I mean, like, yeah, Hutchinson and Ajabo were great, but they had 13 pressures and 3 sacks. But, Michigan ran for close to 300 yards, and Haskett scores 5 touchdowns. I mean, it's hard to say it wasn't the offensive line 2 years ago. How about this? Offensive line and defensive line. Too much? That's it. All right. Mello wants to get a rewatch. I'm thinking about getting out to a bar here locally and doing one of these shows, and maybe we can watch one of these games. One of the Michigan. We'll bring Mello up. Mello, you want to watch the 21 game or you want to watch the 22 game? Come on up. Me and DWA will sit up front and welcome in all the Ohio State fans. Fan dueling in the dog days of summer. I love all sports played. Baseball and golf competitively. Gambling has made all sports fun to watch. Nice. Yeah, it can. It can do it. I thought about, I was watching the All-Star game last night and before, and I'm like, I really want to bet on the All-Star game. It can, if it can, give you a little bit of something to look at. Something to be exciting. So I've got so many comments here. How many more could I read? Let's see. We've got some different names. Tyler cat hair flying in on me. TRH would rather have 2 SEC teams than Ohio State. BK during the dog days of summer, he plays Xbox. He used to love baseball, but after Verlander left, I stopped watching. Yeah, it's different watching the Tigers now. I tell you, I'm with you on that. If the star level of the players at the time you line up and play the game, it's the star level. Zinter, Olu, JJ, the Don, Quorum, Will Johnson, Rod Moore, Mikey, Sainristil, Colson, they would all be 5 stars. I kind of like that approach. Let's talk about who's the 5 who played like 5 stars in those games. We always talk about TCU. That's a lightning rod type of situation. Game was 24-31 points swung on 4 to 5 plays that were either U of M mistakes or ref blunders. Yeah, even if you take the ref blunder and throw it over here, the next play was Michigan fumbling on the one. They still should have scored, but the ref. Yeah, it was let's all go through it. It's pretty easy. It's burned into my brain. The Philly special, the 2 pick sixes, the fumble on the goal line, and the 3rd and 7 that Quentin Johnston that drafted by the Chargers went for 76 yards when DJ Turner had him not in the backfield, but had him short of the first down. I think any of those 5 plays go Michigan's way. Michigan comes up and is able to do it. BK is going to be a Buckeye fan for one day. Look at that. Here's, I think, what you hope. They both can't lose. That's what Andres is saying there. Antoine's betting. Speaking of betting, Antoine always says wait, but uh, he's he's taking Notre Dame on the money line. At least saying that he will. Mozzie, make him a 5-star too. Ringo is looking for a bunch of storylines. Georgia, Bama, Ohio, all breaking in new QBs. Fickle rule. The MSU debacle. Yeah, those are some nice. Those are some nice storylines. The storyline I'm looking at is, early on we have Florida State and LSU. I mean, I'm looking at the big games early on. And in week 4, Notre Dame, OSU, that is a big game. All right, we'll take 5 more. BK, who's been very involved today. He became a Michigan fan in the 80s. We always whooped Ohio State to the 80s and 90s, so I never learned to hate them. Notre Dame, on the other hand, used to be a war every year, so I despise them. Actually, and I'm with you on, Notre Dame in the 80s. They beat Michigan in so many of those openers and crushed the season. It was, you talk to some of the former players, it might be like this for you. Is that like, the Michigan State rivalry? There's one way, and people are like, they say they hate, or despise the players. Actually, they have a certain respect, even though it's Ohio State and they want to beat them, and they'll say the fans will say a lot of things. Actually, it's kind of like, you want it to come down like it did last year, where both of them, it's like a heavyweight fight, and it's all on the line. And so there's going to be a certain amount of respect, even though if you don't say it very often or ever. And with Michigan doing what they did the last 2 years, it's feeling like, it used to be a little bit, not all one-sided, all the way that this rivalry goes. Unfortunately, you can't have one win one year, one win the next year. One's got to rip off 7 in a row or 15 out of 17, whatever it was. So now Michigan's turn to rip off 9 out of 10. Ohio State's like an SEC team. Ethically as well. A little backhanded. That's about as backhanded compliment as you can get. Let's see. All right. I think that's it. I think we've done it. Thanks so much for joining us. Coming up on Friday, we'll be back. We'll talk some college football. We'll look at what's going on with the latest in Michigan. Who's going to don a Michigan cap? Will Michigan be up to 26 recruits? How's the transfer portal looking for the Wolverines on the basketball side and Juwan Howard? We'll cover it all. We'll see you over on the Den and the Maize and Blue Review. Until Friday, everybody have a great day.